Are there any bill introductions this morning from committee? From anybody in the audience? Okay, very good. Thank you. We will then move on to our interim committee reports. And today we have KLRD researcher Mike Ditch. Mike, you've got 2 reports for us, so the floor is yours.
All right, thank you, Chair.
Welcome.
Good morning, committee members. We'll start off with the ICR that's titled Joint Committee on Pensions, Benefits, and Investments.
Yep.
Awesome.
Pensions, investments, and benefits.
Look at me. All right. As the chair said, I'm Mike Ditch with Legislative Research. We'll do a review of the committee report on Joint Committee on Pensions, Investments, and Benefits. You should have the full report in front of you. I also believe Capers is presenting Capers is presenting tomorrow, so I'm just going to stick to the recommendations. If you'd like to flip to page 0-3, there's a gray shaded box. That is the committee's recommendations from the interim. First one, the committee recommends the Senate Ways and Means and House Appropriations Committees consider transferring $500 million from the State General Fund to the Capers Fund in fiscal year 2026. This money would make an additional contribution towards the Capers unfunded actuarial liability. Capers provided testimony in the meeting. The unfunded actuarial liability was about $10 billion as of December 31, 2024. Second recommendation, committee supports and recommends enactment of HB 2086, which would increase the Capers 3 discretionary dividend credit from 75% of the 5-year average net compound rate of return to 80%. The bill would also reduce the discretionary dividend credit threshold from 6% to 5% of the 5-year average net compound rate. Essentially, the bill makes it easier for Capers 3 members to receive a dividend credit by lowering that threshold from 6% to 5%, and then the credit they would get would also be slightly larger for that 75%, increasing it to 80%. Last session, HB 2086 was passed out of the House Financial Institutions and Pensions Committee, passed the House floor at 116-5. You all heard the bill on March 6th of last session, and it currently remains with this committee. The third recommendation, the Joint Committee recommends this committee and its House counterpart explore expanding the Deferred Retirement Option Program to include Unified School District school employees, also known as DROP. DROP allows members to stop contributing to their usual Capers retirement account into a DROP account for a 3 to 5 year period. At the end of the DROP period, the member receives a lump sum payment. Last recommendation you'll see on the list there is the committee recommends this committee and its House counterpart explore opportunities and options to address cost of living adjustments, including dedicated funding sources for potential solutions. With that, Chair, I can stand for any questions or just jump to the next one. All right, the next one is going to be the Joint Committee on Fiduciary Financial Institutions Oversight. Again, full reports in front of you there. The committee met in late July and early November of the 2025 interim. Some context not captured in the report, but probably helpful to get the most out of the report, is that before the July meeting, the media reported that the TEFI's parent company's CEO and board chairman had resigned. And additionally, before the November meeting, the former CEO and board chairman was federally indicted for alleged securities and wire fraud to the detriment of the TEFI's parent company. So with that in mind, I'd like to call your attention to a few specific items in the report, starting on page 0-5. In the July meeting, the Office of the State Bank Commissioner, or the OSBC, testified Beneficient was still the only technology-enabled fiduciary financial institution, or TEFI, operating in the state. In July, the office recently completed an examination of Beneficient's compliance with applicable laws and regulations and monitoring progress on the TEFI's addressing and resolving findings from previous examinations. Commissioner noted these findings were confidential and could not be discussed in detail. In the November meeting, the Commissioner disclosed that significant and repeated violations of Kansas statutes, rules, and regulations were cited, and that due to the volume of violations, the OSBC proposed requiring corrective action. According to the testimony, corrective action signals that OSBC believes the TEFI needs significant improvement to thrive. Testimony noted that items of concern included a lack of corporate oversight and governance, history of operating losses, and ongoing legal challenges. In July, the Commissioner noted several publicly disclosed adverse effects that raised concerns about the TEFI. Those included the parent company's audit containing a lack of going concern clause, meaning auditors believe the TEFI's parent company was on the verge of insolvency, and its recently resigned CEO and chairman on record stating that the only viable course for the parent company was to wind down operations. The Commissioner also noted continuing difficulty to conduct meaningful safety and soundness examinations of TEFIs and suggested the Legislature repeal the TEFI Act and retract the TEFI Charter. A If you turn over to page 0-6, in July, the TEFI and its parent company's representatives presented on the nature of the TEFI, market factors slowing down growth in the industry, and an overview of the insolvency risks and mediation efforts underway. They also explained how the TEFI fund distributions were provided to the beneficent Heartland Foundation and the Department of Commerce. In the July meeting, the COO provided an update about the Heston, Kansas grocery store project funded with the foundation distributions, and it was noted by the COO that construction was not underway, but a committee had been meeting weekly for the past 2 weeks to review project status and progress. Additionally, with the CEO and board chairman resigning, the foundation's board was transferring more control to community members. You turn to the bottom right of page 0-7. In that November meeting, the foundation's chair testified to the committee that new community members on the board would help ensure the grocery store could sustainably serve the town for the long term. It was noted that construction had not started, but downtown activity was occurring to facilitate construction. However, the grocery store project still lacks sufficient funding to start development of the building, despite the TEFI contributing to the foundation more than the statutory requirement. In the July meeting, Commerce testified SEED grant program provides grants to Kansas communities with less than 5,000 people through investments in quality of life initiatives, and that funding is dependent on the annual assessments paid by each chartered TEFI. It was noted Commerce received $250,000 in 2024 that would be dispersed to 12 grant awardees out of 48 applicants. Turning to page 0-8, in the November meeting, the TEFI CEO addressed media coverage around the indictment of the former CEO and reiterated the TEFI's commitment to its distributions to the foundation and Commerce, as well as the viability of the TEFI's business model. The COO testified that OSBC's examination highlighted areas of improvement, but that it was difficult to communicate with OSBC to rectify issues and questions in a timely manner. Testimony was also provided in the November meeting showing the TEFI contacted OSBC about developing statutory changes and regulations for the industry, but that OSBC believed it did not have the authority to issue such changes. So with all of that in mind, I'd ask you to turn to page 0-3, again, the gray box of recommendations. As a result of the conversations around going concerns, OSBC's examination results, and developing more statutory and regulatory framework for the industry, the committee made the following recommendations. 1, the committee recommends OSBC earnestly engage with the TEFI and obtain any other private or professional assistance necessary to create rules and regulations as it pertains to the TEFI industry. 2, the committee recommends a monthly meeting between OSBC and all chartered TEFIs under the TEFI Act. 3, drafting and pre-filing legislation in both chambers to amend the TEFI Act, authorizing the OSBC to revoke a TEFI charter if a TEFI does not comply with statutes or regulations. This bill would also include an appeal process for any charter revocation actions, and that appeal would go through the Legislative Coordinating Council. Since we're in the Senate committee, that bill, if you want to reference it, is SB 300. The 4th recommendation, drafting and pre-filing legislation in both chambers that clearly states the state of Kansas will not accept receivership of a TEFI that is insolvent or declares bankruptcy, and this would be Bill SB 301. And with that, I'll stand for any questions.
Thank you. That was a great overview of some of the things we've been dealing with. Committee, just for information, Senate Bill 301 will have that hearing on Monday, January 26th. So just so you are aware of that. Senate Bill 300 is in our committee. We just haven't scheduled that hearing yet. So questions for the researcher? Senator Gossage.
Thank you, Madam Chair. May I go back to the first report? Would that be okay?
Oh, yes, sure. Is that all right, Mike? Yeah, sure, for sure.
On that, the first bullet point on conclusions and recommendations, it's talking about $500 million from the State General Fund to be put into capers. My question about that is, I know we need to write it, and I know it's the funding is not fully funded. I understand that. But it is the employer that puts money into capers, correct?
Sort of.
Sort of. I would probably defer to capers to answer that question.
Okay, I will wait and ask them this question then. Thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Any other questions of either report, on either report? Thank you so much. Appreciate your concise overview. And these are standing committees, so we'll have another interim on this next off session. So thank you so much. Thank you for being here. Well, committee, so the first thing we have on our agenda after our reports is hearing and deliberation on agency budgets. So this is our overview of their budgets for Capers and for the state treasurer. And so I guess I would invite, Jared, are you our, or I'm sorry, Stephen. Sorry, Stephen, you're going to give us the overview and then Jared can give us, okay. Thank you.
Stephen Wu, Legislative
I
Research.
didn't even see you, Stephen, so thank you.
Hiding out over there. I'm just here to set up the discussion on the budget. Jared Waltner, the Planning Research Officer with Capers, is sitting behind me, as is Chris Holm, the Chief Financial Officer. They'll be able to speak more in detail on specific operations.
Can you hold on one second while we get all this in front of us? Stephen, thank you. Just 1 second. Everybody have your documentation? Okay, go ahead.
All right. So the budget document you have before you is a summary of the agency's budget request. The primary audience for this are folks, legislators that are very entrenched in the process. So a lot of this will seem like new language to you. I will do my best to walk through each of the different sections and what is included in it. So just as a high-level overview, what is before this committee today? When we talk about Capers, we can refer to two things. We can refer to the system as a whole, the system that includes the Capers plans 1, 2, and 3, as well as KPNF, the Police and Firemen's Retirement System, as well as the system for judges. We can also, when we say Capers, we can also refer to the state agency that administers those, the Capers system, and that's the budget before you today. So what that means is that the dollars that are reflected in this document, they don't include costs that are related to paying out benefits. Those are funded by other state agencies, by other employers, and for accounting purposes, we do not include those in our budgetary documents. So what is included in these budget documents are the operational costs for Capers, as well as some improvement and modernization costs. If you will flip the page to, I'm going to skip to page 3, offers a high-level summary of the budget overall, its trends over time. If you look at that table in the middle, you'll see that the Capers budget while it has grown over the past 10-ish years, we see a sharper increase in recent years, and that's largely due to a modernization project of its pension administration system. But otherwise, its operations have remained relatively stable throughout this time frame, as well as their FTE count, which has remained just a little under 100 FTE positions. Turning to page 4 and 5, this will provide a high-level overview of what is in the budget for the past couple of years of actual expenditures, as well as what is being requested for fiscal years 26 and 27. These are the 2 years that will be represented in the appropriations bill that the body will be voting on later in session. So as you can see here, most of Capers' costs appears in that contractual services line. I'm looking at the bottom of page 4. What are included in here are largely costs related to investment management and consultant fees, as well as contractual services expenditures related to modernization of their pension administration system. There's a more detailed breakdown on page 5. If you flip the page to 6, I give a high-level breakdown of the expenditures by program. These are just programmatic units that exist in the budget system and how much is budgeted for it. Page 7 details the expenditures by fund. The primary funding source for the Capers as a state agency is the trust fund. The trust fund not only funds and supports the operations for Capers, but is also the primary fund, as the committee is well aware, the primary fund to pay out benefits. I've included some background information on the trust fund down below. Would be happy to answer any questions on it, but for specific details on it, I would defer either to Capers or would follow up. There haven't been any significant increases that would impact the operations, the budget that you see before you. At this point, I'd like to jump into fiscal years 26 and 27, the items that would be reflected in the appropriations bill. This starts on page 8. Our starting point for both of these years is what the 2025 legislature approved for fiscal year 26. So the tables that you'll see here compare against that point. They read sort of like a ledger. If you go down the list, each line will show a different item of change. So if we start at the top, number 1, we see that the legislature last year approved roughly $93 million for the state agency in expenditures. The vast majority of this is financed by the Capers Trust Fund. Since the legislature last met, there have been a couple of changes, a couple of updates to the agency estimate. just jumping down the list, the first one is it's item 2. This is modernization of the pension administration system. Especially for returning senators to this committee, this should be a familiar topic. KPERS has been in the planning stages of modernizing their administration system that delivers benefits to employees as well as interfaces with employers. This has been an ongoing process. They're now at the early stages of their 5-year implementation process. The overall project plans have not changed since they've presented their budget before the legislature last year. It's still a 5-year project. Total cost is still about $75 million. Financing source is still the trust fund. If you turn to page 9, I've included a roadmap of the process overall, a high-level roadmap. It's broken out into 5 phases plus a 1-year warranty period at the end. The lion's share of this will be in phase 3. This is a 60-month period that is for implementation. There are many iterations that they will go through to modernize individual components of the system. It's not until November of 2029 that they're estimated to complete the system in preparation of rolling out in later that month. So what that means for the KPERS budget in 26 is that relative to what the legislature approved last year, they're now estimating about $1 million more in costs for 26. The total cost, the 5-year cost overall, hasn't changed. This is just a shifting in between years as they've gotten new information. Moving on to item 3, these are those investment-related expenses I talked about. These are percentage-based fees paid to investment managers and consultants based on performance of the fund. So as the fund does better, so these fees increase, and the inverse as well. Here we see that relative to the approved budget, the KPERS budget includes roughly $160,000 decrease in fees paid to these managers. This is a relatively small amount of the overall fees paid. And lastly, there have been some changes in general operations. I've included them in detail on the bottom of page 9 and to 10, but they really a small drop in the bucket. Moving on to 27.
Stephen, could you stop just for 1 second? I think I may have misunderstood you, and I was trying to take a note here. Did you say that the management fee expenses increase as the fund does better?
Yes, the larger the fund, the higher those fees will be. So if the fund is earning more, then those fees will increase.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to jump into 27 because a lot of these items will be the same as in 26. If our starting point of comparison is still the 26 approved budget, we see those same 3 items. Relative to what the legislature approved for 26, we see some increases for the pension administration system. We see increases for those investment-related expenses, and we see some increases for general operations. The modernization line, item 1, it may seem like a large increase, $4.2 million relative to what the legislature approved last year, but that is only because we're the point of comparison. Because we're looking at a comparison of what the legislature approved into what they're now requesting into 27. As the administration system ramps up, this is corresponding with that. So again, overall costs haven't increased. This is just, this is reflective of the project taking off and hitting its stride. And those other 2 items, investment-related expenses, we see increases there as well as in general operations. Madam Chair, at this point, would be happy to entertain any questions on this here. Otherwise, I would turn it over to Jared and Chris for their comments.
Committee questions? Any questions? Senator Gossage?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I must be the person who always needs KPERS special ed, because I always have questions about that, and I appreciate you answering them. When it comes to administration, you're right, it does appear to be a big jump. And I'm wondering why treasurer's unclaimed property one is in here. Maybe we could ask the treasurer when he comes forward about that. But also you were saying this is when the PAS modernization is ramping up. Could you explain what that means?
Yeah, so it's a 5-year project. The lion's share of the cost will be in the middle of those 5 years as, the bulk of the work is done, right? If we think of the beginning of the process as in fiscal year 26, as we move into 27 and 28, we'll see those costs increase as, they really take off and do a lot of the work. So that's one part of it. The other part of it is just related to updated estimates. They've got new information based on the work that's already done, and so the numbers, the budget they are requesting for fiscal year '27, they've adjusted it to be, to be updated for that.
And can you clarify, when you say modernization, are we talking about an IT program?
Yes, we are.
Because typically, you're going to see more of the initial cost early on in the IT program. And then once it gets ramping up, the cost is reduced. This seems the flip. Can you explain that?
For this, I think I'm going to kick it to Capers to respond on how they constructed their specific budget.
Okay. All right, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, very good. Questions, committee? And I'll have the treasurer's office address that unclaimed property question. Stephen?
I can speak on that very briefly.
Oh, sure.
It's included in the Capers budget because it was included in legislation to do so. The appropriations bill used to contain language prohibiting administration of that fund. That language has since been, that prohibition has since been removed from the appropriations bill, and so what is in administration for the unclaimed property fund moved back into Capers. This happened, I think, 2 years ago.
So this is for administration.
Yeah, these are administrative costs related.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Jared, did you want to address some of the budget issues, items, clarification?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, we do have a memo that we brought along with us.
We have 2 new members of the committee, so will you
Sure.
give us your name and title?
Yes, so I am Jared Waltner. I'm the Planning and Research Officer. Normally, Alan Conroy would be doing this presentation, but he is with the House committee right now, so he was unable to be here at this time. I'm here with Chris Holm, who is our CFO. He was hired last March, so he's new to Capers this session. Last session, we still had Judy McNeil prior to her retirement. If it's all right, I might just talk about the TUP briefly before I start. So the TUP program in Capers is, it's just management of the Treasurer's Unclaimed Property funds there are certain restrictions on investment vehicles at the Pooled Money Investment Board, which is where another portion of the TUP funds are. So there are different parameters inside the TUP program for Capers, and generally we are able to get a higher return on those idle funds, and then any growth on the funds is transferred to the State General Fund. So it's a program that was put into place, I don't remember exactly, but as Stephen mentioned, it was put on hold about 10 years ago, and it was just kept on ice for 2 or 3 years until the loan to the Pooled Money Investment Board was repaid by the legislature, and then the language stopping that program was sunset, and so the treasurer has the authority to transfer funds to this program within Capers or out of the fund with Capers, but it's just a way to manage the idle funds in the treasurer's unclaimed property to earn a slightly higher investment return than what they can do in the PMIB.
Thank you.
So on this blue memo, it's 4 pages long. I'll cover the first 2 pages, just briefly giving you an update on Capers. Of course, we are the state's retirement system. We cover general state employees and local employees, public safety employees, and the police and firemen's retirement system. And then there's also a retirement system for judges. We have about 350,000 members between our actives, our inactives, and our retired members. Based on the current population projections, that's about 1 out of every 9 Kansans directly connected to the Capers system. As you can see in those bulleted, in the bulleted section on the first page, we have about 156,000 active members, ranging in ages from 16 to 92. Our oldest member is 92 years old. We have members with more than 50 years of service, so a lot of long-serving, dedicated public employees that are part of our plan. We also are making benefit payments to retired members and beneficiaries, about 118,000 of them. And Capers benefits are paid for life. So we have some some retirees who are 106 years old and they're still getting their benefit every month as they've earned throughout their career. And then we also have about 77,000 inactive members who have service with KPERS. They may be eligible for retirement in the future if they choose to leave their funds with the system and receive that benefit in the future. We also partner with 1,500 employers. Of course, the state of Kansas is our largest employer, but then we also cover all 286 school districts, all of the counties, most of the cities. There are some, Wichita is the big one that comes to mind. They're large enough to have their own retirement system, so they're not a part of KPERS. And then we have a lot of other government units, fire districts, water districts, rec commissions, all the way down from 1 or 2 employees up to more than 10,000 at some of these school districts in the state of Kansas. Of course, we're focused on quality service for those employees. You can see in that first paragraph after the bullets how quick or how often we're contacted. We have more than 120,000 phone calls a year, close to 30,000 emails. We do a lot of transfers of people from one employer to another, or they leave service, or they come back after a break. So we spend a lot of time working with our members and trying to make their interaction with the retirement system as seamless as possible. And then I think the key here is every year, right now, we're making about 1.4 million payments to people, and the total benefits that were received in fiscal year 25 was $2.3 billion that was paid out from the retirement plan to our beneficiaries. On the second page, talking about our funding sources. So KPERS is funded from the KPERS Trust Fund. That's both administrative costs and our benefit payments. The trust fund receives revenue from employee contributions, employer contributions, and investment earnings. And of course, the IRS has very strict regulations on how a trust fund can be used. So once the funds have been deposited into the trust fund, they can only be expended for the exclusive benefit of our members. So as I said, that trust fund is the source for all of our administrative expenditures and those benefit payments. We also administer the Deferred Retirement Option Program, KPERS 457. That's a voluntary program. It's all employee money. The state of Kansas participates, and we just recently signed up our 500th local employer that also participates in the 457 plan, and people can use that vehicle to make contributions pre-tax or post-tax, and use that as a savings vehicle in addition to their KPERS retirement. I think importantly, KPERS does not receive a state general fund appropriation directly. We are fully funded by our KPERS Trust Fund in our operating expenditures. And then I'll stop here at the bottom of page 2 in our revenues. You can see the 3 sources of revenue to the trust fund in that dollar bill graphic. So about 15% of our income comes from our member contributions, 35% from the employer contributions, and then about 50% come from KPERS investments, and that's the total income to the trust fund over the last 20 years. So you can see how important those investments are to the trust.
Jared?
Yes?
This might tie into Senator Gorsuch's question. Do you want to ask Jared your question?
Thank you, Madam Chair. My question was, and you just mentioned this, and the chair is right. I was thinking, okay, so 50% of this has come from investments, 35% from the employer, 15% from member contributions. And then we know that the fund has been underfunded. And then this request of $500 million to come from the state general fund, wouldn't that be divided among that we are needing more funds, so that should come from the employer and the employees, whomever, who participate in the fund, rather than we're just going to have the taxpayers take care of this underfunding? Could you address that?
Yeah, so contributions to the trust fund are from the 2 employer and employee sources. The employee piece is fixed in statute. So for KPERS members, they contribute 6% of pay from their paychecks every month or biweekly or however often they're paid. And then the variable portion goes to the employer. So if there's for some reason funding falls behind and there needs to be an increase in those contributions, that will fall on the employer side because the employee contributions are fixed by statute. So those do not change.
So the employer for state employees is the state.
Correct.
But for school districts, counties, others, are they participating in this, or is just the state taking the full brunt?
So everybody is participating. School districts are unique in that the state is making the KPERS contribution for all of the local school districts, but all of your cities and counties, they're making payment from their own funding sources for the KPERS contributions.
Okay, I'm still not understanding. Again, I guess I need a tutor on KPERS. So when these funds are you saying they are sending us the money, it goes into the general fund, then we take the money out of the general fund to put it into KPERS? Is that what I'm understanding you say?
No, so for school districts in particular, the state sends money from the state general fund to each school district, and it'll go to an account at each individual school district that they cannot use for any other purpose. And then the next day, or very shortly after it's received, that's turned around and remitted back to KPERS for their KPERS contributions. That mechanism may seem a little strange, but it was put in place during the school funding lawsuits. I think there was some concern that maybe there wasn't full recognition of the KPERS contribution as a school funding effort, and so they put in that sort of in and out mechanism for the school districts to make the payment. But the KPERS contributions to school districts are paid by the state. Now, all like Shawnee County, they're making their KPERS contributions, but it's from their own funding sources. There's no state general fund included for those other local employers.
So then I go back to this $500 that's supposed to help with a shortfall. It seems that the state is picking up the whole brunt of that.
The 500 million in the actuarial liability.
Yes, that's correct.
I guess I don't know what that means.
So there's currently an unfunded liability. It's about $10 billion in the latest valuation. That is going to have to be paid at some point in the future. 500 million, putting 500 million in now will reduce the required contributions in the future. So the idea of having a large lump sum payment earlier is like trying to pay off a mortgage earlier or something. You're trying to get ahead of the principal on the debt owed. And so that is what this $500 million would do. It would reduce future contributions that are required by the employer. But the unfunded liability is going to have to be paid one way or the other. You can do it today or you can do it in the future. So it's just a matter of timing. This $500 million would get some funding into the trust fund earlier. It would reduce that unfunded liability and then reduce future employer contributions.
And that sounds like a wise move. And I totally get that. It's just dividing up who's paying, who's helping to pay that unfunded liability.
Okay. That is a longer conversation. Because the source of that unfunded liability is also a piece of this.
Okay, thank
So
you.
we will cover that maybe when Alan comes tomorrow, I
Yes,
think, to
Alan
do.
will.
Can we talk about that then?
Yes, there's several slides on our
Perfect.
current funded status in that presentation that Alan.
So I think that will
Thank
be
you very much. Thank
very
you, Madam
helpful.
Chair.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for the questions. Go ahead, Jared.
If there are other questions, that's all I had as far as remarks. I was going to turn it over to Chris to talk specifically about our budget on the next couple of pages, unless there are other questions that people have for me.
Just a couple minutes. Welcome. Introduce yourself if you would.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My name is Chris Holm. I'm the Chief Financial Officer at KPERS. I've been here since about last March by way of the Department of Revenue, where I was previously the CFO there, so I'm glad to be here today. I'm here to talk about the fiscal year 26 and 27 budget. I'll go quickly because Stephen and Jared did a nice job of covering. Basically, I say that KPERS is split up into three different pieces: the administrative piece, which is our normal operating budget, and then our retirement benefits budget, which is estimated to be about $2.5 billion in fiscal year 26 and $2.7 billion in fiscal year 27. And then also our investment-related expenses as well. KPERS operates with 99 employees. Our Board of Trustees has the authority to create positions as needed for the requirements of the system. And one question that I wanted to address from Senator Gossage a little bit ago was about our pension administrative system modernization. And right now, we're in the year 1.5, I would say, of a 5-year project, and it's split up into 11 different pieces. So as the different milestones are met and deliverables, that's how it factors into our operating budget. So right now, we're working on our member portal and employer web portal as well with pay period reporting. We have an employer reporting group that we consult with. It's our users out in the field to get their input on our design and development. And we're also working with other of our stakeholders as well that use our data and and we're working with them. I'm meeting state agencies like the State Treasurer's Office, also the Department of Administration, and the Board of Regents as well as we work on our design and development. Another big piece of the puzzle, which we're working on right now, is data cleansing, which means taking all of the data from the current system and moving it to the new system, making sure that all the records are complete before they're moved. So that's where we're at right now, and we're still on time to go live in November of 2029.
Thank you. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you, and I'm happy to stand for any questions if there are any.
Any additional questions, committee? Thank you so much for being here, Chris and Jared and Stephen, for your overview of the Capers budget. Absolutely appreciate that. Thank you. Next, we've got the treasurer, the Office of the State Treasurer's budget, and we have Jacob Klepsy. Hi, Jacob, welcome. Do we have, you've got the packets, thank you. Give us a minute here to pass this out. We're just all about money today, aren't we? Thank you, Jacob. Okay, I think we're ready.
Good morning, Madam Chair. My name is Jacob Klesby. I'm a fiscal analyst with KLRD assigned to the Office of the State Treasurer. Behind me in the audience is their fiscal director and director of operations, Shauna Wake, and the State Treasurer. Both of them are prepared to stand and answer questions. In front of you, you have a document similar to what Stephen passed out. This is the budget summary for the Office of the State Treasurer. In addition, you have 2 additional documents, one printed on yellow paper and the other printed on white paper. These are reports that illustrate the governor's, these illustrate the changes from the agency request made by the Legislative Budget Committee, and then the yellow sheet indicates the governor's recommendations from the LBC. And my apologies, those are being passed out as we speak.
Okay, we're good.
Okay. And I will be going into greater detail into these documents and their context as we approach the analysis of each of the fiscal years. The Office of the State Treasurer is the designated fiscal agent for the state of Kansas and is responsible for the timely receipt and deposit of all receipts and revenues into the state treasury. If you look at page 1 on the budget summary, you will see 2 pie charts. The one on the left indicates the State Treasurer's State General Fund budget, or SGF. The Office of State Treasurer has $13 million of SGF, which is less than 1% of all statewide general fund spending. And on the right, you'll see the State Treasurer as part of all funds, and the State Treasurer's total budget is $150 million, and it makes up 1% of all state spending. If you will turn to page 2 of the document, this will illustrate a 10-year expenditure history of the agency. As you will notice, there are some very drastic peaks and valleys on this line chart, but what these are related to are the distribution of grant funding that the agency is in charge of facilitating and distributes to these designated various local programs. This chart does not illustrate the administrative cost and expenses by the agency. Below the line graph, there is a table illustrating a itemized 10-year expenditure history of the agency, illustrating SGF, all funds, FTE positions, and a consumer price index. And below that, on the bottom of page 2, is a table illustrating the 5-year, 10-year, and 3-year average of these values. If you will turn to page 3 of the document, this highlights expenditures by major purpose. Once again, you'll see the similar peaks and valleys, but broken more into itemized content. Starting with the solid blue line near the bottom for state operations, this line is related to the administrative cost of the agency. And aside from a small peak in 2024 through 2025, that has remained largely consistent. Other assistance does include various state aid programs administered within the state. And then once again, as you'll see with capital budget and state aid, the light blue and green lines, there are sharp increases, but these are once again related to the distribution and pass-through of grant funding. The table on page 3 below the line graph illustrates numerical values as contained within the chart. This provides a breakdown of state operations. Most of the expenditures in state operations are related to salaries and wages at 2.3% of the agency's overall budget. 1.3% is dedicated to contractual services. 0.1% is dedicated to both commodities and capital outlay with their own percentages respectively. Continuing down, state aid and assistance makes up 96.3% of the budget, and 73% of this budget is broken into aid to locals and 23.3% as other assistance. Turning to page 4, this just presents a more itemized view of the information included on page 3. It is broken down just into the broader categories and what is contained in each of those with an expenditure history of the last 3 fiscal years. Turning to page 5, this continues a breakdown of that same information, highlighting state aid, other assistance, capital budget, and debt. If you will turn to page 6, this shows where expenditures within operations of the agency are located, and then FTE positions by program within the agency as well. Once again, both these tables are for both the previous 3 fiscal years. Turning to page 7, this goes into expenditures by fund. The fund highlighted on this page is the Build Kansas Matching Grant Fund. This is the fund that is primarily responsible for those large peaks and valleys that you saw on the previous history of the agency's expenditures. The 2023 legislature authorized the Build Kansas Matching Grant Fund to be administered by the Office of State Treasurer. Funds are transferred by the State General Fund to this fund for the purpose of providing the required local match funding for entities in Kansas that qualify for and are approved for funding under the Federal Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. If you will look at the table on the bottom of page 7, you will see that it highlights fiscal years 2024 through 2027. This highlights the beginning balance of each year. The revenue, which in 2024 consisted of an operating transfer of $50 million, which began the Build Kansas Matching Grant Fund, followed by expenditures and then an ending balance. And if you will look, the ending balance in each fiscal year transfers to become the beginning balance of the previous fiscal year. Moving into the documents that were handed out to you related to the LBC recommendations and the governor's recommendation. The LBC's motion froze the $50 million transfer in fiscal year 2027 to the Build Kansas Matching Grant Fund. The governor restored half of this transfer, but it has still frozen $25 million of that $50 million. But as of this current moment and what is before this committee, the $50 million transfer in fiscal year 2027 remains frozen. Right. Turning to page 8 of the document, this begins our analysis of fiscal year 2026. The agency was approved for a budget of $50 million and 40 FTE positions. The agency does not have any reappropriations within this year, nor is the agency requesting any supplemental packages nor FTE increases. Moving into the agency changes, which begin under line item 2 in the table, and then line item 2 in greater detail on page 8. The agency's revised estimate includes an increase of $98.3 million, all from the Build Kansas Matching Grant Fund. To clarify for the committee, this is not the agency per se requesting $98 million added to their budget, nor are they saying that there is $98 million just floating unencumbered. As the facilitator of the Build Kansas Matching Grant Fund, the agency is requesting to spend up to the remaining balance in the Build Kansas Matching Grant Fund. The grant application process is still underway, and I can defer to the agency at a later time as for what the estimates and current distributions are. But this is the agency just requesting to spend up to that amount of money in their facilitation of the Build Kansas Matching Grant Fund. On line item 3, which once again is in the table in greater detail on line item 3 on page 8, the agency revised estimate does include a requested increase of $1.1 million, all from the Star Bonds Food Sales Tax Revenue Replacement Fund. These funds are provided to cities and counties across 7 Star Bond districts to hold Star Bond holders harmless from the elimination of the food sales tax. Moving to line item 4 in the table and then explained in greater detail on page 9 is unclaimed property. The agency's revised estimate does include an increase of $950,000, all special revenue funds, for an increase in anticipated unclaimed property claims in fiscal year 2026. Transfers to pay claims of unclaimed property totaled $21.4 million in fiscal year 2025. And for both fiscal year 2026 and 2027, the agency estimates unclaimed property payout claims of totaling $21.7 million. Under line item 5 on page 9 and then line item 5 in the table, the agency revised estimate does include an increase of $122,000 for higher contractual service expenditures in fiscal year 2026. This is primarily attributable to an increased marketing budget for programs related to education cost savings. And then finally, under line item 6, the agency revised estimate includes an increase of $118,000. This increase is primarily attributable to funding allocated for previously approved but unfunded FTE positions, as well as the hiring of interns and other temporary staff. And then just once again, this is within the agency's approved 40 FTE positions, and they are not asking for any additional positions. I'm happy to stand for questions on fiscal year 2026 or move to fiscal year 2027.
We should keep going.
Okay. If you will turn to page 10 of the document, this begins the analysis of fiscal year 2027. The Office of the State Treasurer is not a biennial agency, so they do not have an approved budget for fiscal year 2027. This document does use the approved for fiscal year 2026 as a starting reference point, and so as you will see, there is the approved starting point of $50 million. The agency, once again, has 40 FTE positions, and they are not requesting any increases, nor are they requesting any enhancement requests. However, if you will notice under line item 1 in the table, and then line item 1 explained in greater detail below, there is a represented decrease totaling $17 million. This is not a true decrease per se. This is related to approved expenditures that the agency was approved for by the 2025 legislature to continue in fiscal year 2027. However, reappropriations only move ahead one fiscal year, so currently they are just awaiting reappropriation funding in fiscal year 2027 to fund these programs. This $17 million is broken into $13 million SGF and $4 million of other funds. $10 million of that SGF is dedicated to aviation jobs. $3 million of SGF is dedicated to pregnancy compassion awareness. And then another $4 million is dedicated to the Star Bonds Food Sales Tax Replacement Revenue. Moving to the agency changes, the agency is requesting the transfer of $50 million for Build Kansas. This is the amount that was frozen by the legislature, and it currently remains frozen. Under line item 2, the agency is requesting an increase of $930,000 for unclaimed property claims. This is once again just attributable to estimated increases in a total estimated payout of $21.7 million in fiscal year 2027. There's under line item 4 on page 10, there is an increase of $158,000. This is once again related to an increased marketing budget and education cost savings. And then under line item 5 in the table on page 10 and explained in greater detail on page 11, there is an agency increase of $151,000, which is once again attributed to approved but unfunded FTE positions, as well as the hiring of interns and other temporary staff. That concludes the presentation for the
Thank you.
Office of State Treasurer. I'm happy to stand for questions.
Thank you. Do we have any questions of Jacob? Senator Hill?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Jacob. A quick question on the increase in that Star Bond replacement money for groceries. It was 1 million in '26, and it goes to 4 million in '27. I was thinking that took effect like in July in '26. Why did that quadruple rather than double?
Madam Chair, so the request that you are speaking about in fiscal year 2026 under line item 3, so that is related to what the agency is requesting for above the approved budget. So it's a expected increase in fiscal year 2026. On fiscal year 2027, the $4 million for Star Bonds is part of the reappropriations that have not yet taken place. So the $1 million is an increase above what they were previously approved for to spend on Star Bonds, while the $4 million in fiscal year 2027 is the entirety of their approved budget, if that makes sense. It just has not been funded and is currently displaying as a decrease.
Okay, thank you.
The Treasurer's Office might also be able to speak to that if that is helpful. Shauna or Stephen, do you want to step up and we'll just explain it in maybe a different way? You did a great job, Jacob. We're just. Can you answer that for us, Shauna?
Hi, everybody. Thank you for having me. My name is Shauna Wake, and I am the Director of Operations and Fiscal Services with the State Treasurer's Office. In the packet that Jacob is passing out, there is a one-pager on our agency, some frequently asked questions that the House side likes to have, so I figured you guys might like to read through it. Then there is a breakout of what's been paid out for the Build Kansas Fund to date for this year and the status of the fund. Right behind that is the sales tax replacement monies that have gone out so far this fiscal year. It is a one-time-a-year distribution, so that is the amount that was spent this year. As far as the estimate on those funds, we do rely on the Department of Revenue and those districts for those estimates. The amounts increased over time based on the decrease in sales tax that was being charged to those districts, so that the make-whole amount was increasing as the sales tax was decreasing. The reason it's not in the '27 budget is because we'll spend it if you all tell us to, but until you tell us to, we're not going to include it in our budget. So that's where that's at right now.
Thank you so much for this. We've only got about 4 more minutes, and we have to vacate the room. So questions, or Treasurer Johnson, would you like to say a few words? Okay, very good. Committee, any more questions about this? Very thorough. Thank you, researchers. Thank you for providing this information. I know it's just a short amount of time to absorb a lot, but thank you. I mean, you obviously all do a great job. You're holding your FTE steady. There's really, I don't think I have any questions. Do you, Vice Chair Fagg, are you good? Because you're on Ways and Means, and you might have more.
I need more than 4 minutes.
You need more than 4 minutes. Would you like to take a couple?
You might spend a lot. Aviation jobs, $10 million. What's that going for, and why was that not 5 or 15? I wonder what they base that on.
So there is that was a $10 million SGF loan that happened last fiscal, or this fiscal year really, and it was a one-time appropriation in the appropriations bill last year. We didn't carry that forward into next year. Again, you all didn't instruct us to, and unless and until you do, we're not going to carry that forward.
Okay, so it's just sitting there, yeah.
Well, it's gone.
Oh, it's gone, it has been expended.
It has been
Sorry.
expended, yes, for fiscal year '26.
Got it. Thank you. Senator Gossage.
I have so many questions, but I'll just, in the brevity of time, just ask about the Build Fund. Is this just a grant that's coming out of the State General Fund?
Build Kansas.
If I may, the Build Kansas Advisory Committee was formed in the 2023 legislature, I believe, to provide Kansas match dollars for the BIL funds at the federal level. The committee meets regularly and approves those grant applications. I believe Senator Fagg is on that committee. We do the distributions after the federal grants have been approved. So the list in that packet that you have is all of the grants that have been approved at the federal level, and we have a fully executed agreement with them. The amounts that have been distributed have, at the same rate, been distributed by the federal government.
Treasurer Johnson, I think you want to add a little bit to that, maybe?
Thank you. Shauna has the details, and I really can't add to that, but at a super high level with Build Kansas and aviation loans, that is us executing on specific direction from the legislature. So in a proviso at the end of last year, there was a directive for us to do $10 million from SGF to a specific aviation loan, and that is what has been executed. The Build Kansas funds were also appropriated or directed with the committee set up that makes the decisions on when and where to send those based on grants. We have the privilege of sending those monies once that decision has been made, but we're not in a position to make those decisions. Similarly, on the monies that come through with the STAR bonds, the Department of Revenue tells us what their best estimate is. We keep track of that and record that. It is in our budget, but each of those are directives that we have. To that end, we will do our best on FTE count, but aviation took a solid 2 months of legal time. A collateral pool will take an FTE at some point to operate, so I don't know that I can make a promise that we are able to operate on that, but in each case, it is simply executing the statutory directive that we are glad to get.
Well, thank you so much. Committee, we've had a lot of information today. Thank you for hanging in there. We have another committee, so meeting adjourned. Thank you so much.